Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of the Hesse vlog. My name is Stephen Hesse. I run the Geek Apocalypse network, which is geekapocalypse.com, and we're on Twitch, and we also have a podcast. You can find all the information. Up there, I think. Up there, is it? I feel like I'm doing like the Hokey Cokey or something here, or I'm like sort of getting a plane to come in to dock, like I'm just like to dock, like to boat, to dock. Okay, you're in the wrong place, plane, but I'm just gonna get you to dock. You're in a harbour. You should be looking for an airport, but no. Also, it reminds me of the old joke about the guy when the guy died who did the Hokey Cokey. They tried to get him in the coffin, but they couldn't because they were trying to get the left foot in, the left foot out. The old jokes are the best, eh? But yeah, welcome. Thank you for checking out my vlog. And there's something I wanted to talk about, which is one of the reasons that's inspired me to do this, is to talk about this idea of it's not just about right and wrong. And I really want to talk about that because there's a couple of examples I've seen in everyday life, and in stuff that I've been reading recently that I think underlines this point quite relevantly. So that's what's inspired me to write this, because you very often get people in life, and I know you'll know somebody like this. I know you will know somebody like this that will say that it's right for me, but it's not right. You know, it's right for me, therefore it's right. You know, when they go, I'm doing what's right for me, and then they don't claim that that's being self-centered. They don't claim that that's what's right for them. That they're doing just what's right for them, and they find their way of saying that to make it so they're not sounding like a complete cunt when, let's face it, they are. But they don't want to be perceived that way, so they do the old adage of, it's a bit like people, we talked about this on stream on Twitch, on our Twitch channel, and we had this discussion. It's about, it's like people who use the term honest and use it in a way where they say some completely horrible things to people and say, I'm just being honest. No, you're not. You're being a cunt. You're being an absolute dick, and that's not acceptable. And I know there's different avenues to go down on that, because I'm one of these people who believes that it should be everybody's right to be offensive, and that because that's the avenue of free speech people don't like. There's a lot of people who have this remit of, I'm going to be a fan of free speech, and then get upset when people say something they don't like. I'd rather be in that life where someone says something to me that they don't like, and than be in a position where people just tell me what I want to hear. I want to grow and be a better person, and that's the only way that will happen, by having outward different perspectives from different people, and that includes people who are right twats to each other. It's a bit like when I go out and I get the whole, oh, you look like a blonde Bob Marley, or an out of shape Bob Marley, or you look like a Yeti on acid or something, I don't know. And I'm fine with that, because I chose to have dreads. I can't change how I look, like in a natural sense, but I chose to look the way that I look because that's what makes me feel the way I am. So these people who come to me and say these offensive things, I get the opposite. I get people who are dead nice, but the people who say the offensive stuff tell me that they're not worth my time. So people being offensive is incredibly useful. It is so much more poignant and beneficial than having someone who says nothing at all. Because, and another, like, and I know this is like a little off topic, but I'm just making this final point of that it's a bit like, you know, if people do not say what they really think about something, they'll never learn that it's wrong in the first place. So in comparison to this idea of it's not just about right or wrong, it's about teaching people actually what that actually means. Because there's too many people who say this, oh, it's about, you know, I'm right and you're wrong. And sometimes it's never as simplistic as that. And there's other things to consider. It's not just that. And I think people spend too much focus on whether it is right or wrong, what they think, rather than what the human race thinks, which is kind of the point I want to make in this whole vlog. Is that's what a lot of people focus on, what they think about something, in this sort of cocoon of that they're right in what they think, and not sort of having the perspective to look at other examples of what they think and go, actually, I'm not sure that this is what I think. And I can give 100 of examples in my lifetime where I've completely changed my mind about certain things. You know, one of the things, I grew up in a religious family. Now I'm not religious at all. Well, I say religious family. My mum was religious and didn't like the fact that none of us in our family are religious at all. She feels like she's sort of failed in that aspect, or at least she brought it up enough times. But I had the fortitude to read other stuff and look at the Sunday school perspective of people looking at this very old book and telling me how to live my life. And I remember at 12 years old going, I don't really feel anything towards this, because I asked the great question, which I'm proud of myself for being like 11 and asking this question of, you know, the Good Samaritan. What they said, if you see someone who does something good, think of the Good Samaritan story. And I said, what if the person does something good and they are not religious? Does that not make them a good person? And they looked at me with a degree of like, oh, well, they must be, you know, a believer. Like sort of like God takes credit for a human being good. And I had a real problem with that. It didn't make sense to me. I used to get thrown out of Sunday school classes for saying something that they didn't like, you know, because they want you to conform. They don't want you to think. They want you to conform. And that's the problem with this ideology of thinking what's right or wrong from your perspective. Yeah, you can make a moral compass of what you think is morally acceptable. But my point is, I don't think people get that far. There's too many people who think they're always all right. And it's very often, their right is motivated by self-preservation and by being self-centered. And that's not what being morally right is about. It just isn't. But I don't think people spend enough time thinking of that. And the two examples that got me thinking about this was the main one, which has happened recently and is going on right now, is someone I was hugely a fan of before, like when I started podcasting and when I started wanting to interview people, was a guy called Jian Ghomeshi. Now he runs a thing called, he did, he doesn't anymore, but he runs this program called QTV, which is on the Canadian broadcasting, CBC, I don't know what the other C stands for, I'm not from Canada, apologies. And he was known for like doing really great interviews and basically getting QTV off the ground. He was, you know, regarded as a personality and in his own right, and was well known and good at his work and all that kind of thing. And I was really like sort of inspired by this guy. And he was famous for example, he interviewed Billy Bob Thornton, and when Billy Bob Thornton came on with his band, and Thornton didn't like the fact that he brought up the fact that he was an actor in the introduction. He barely talked about it, and it's famous for him blowing up, and he had to cancel his Canadian tour with his band because people threw stuff at him saying he was a dick, which he kind of was. And so that kind of got him some notoriety because of just Thornton pissing off an entire nation, basically, because loads of people listened to this radio show that Jian did. And the reason he's coming up now is because he's just been done for sexual assault in the workplace and sexual abuse and sexual, you know, and emotional turmoil that he's given some of his staff members. And there's loads of people come forward saying that was what he was like. And I have a real problem with the whole scenario of this, because obviously, right, if we take the simple premise of what's right and what's wrong, it's obviously not right what he did. If this happens to be true, they're still in court and stuff, sorting stuff out. But if it's obviously not right for anyone to do that and make people feel that bad about things. But it's also incredibly wrong that all these amounts of people made the distinction of it was right for them to not say anything, to self-preserve themselves over the if I say this, I might have found out that other people were like this, and this may have not lasted so long. I think so many people focus on this idea of that they're the victim, and there's nobody else that feels like they do. And that's really the crux of this problem. And I'm not taking away the turmoil and terrible stuff that they went through. And if this turns out to be true, he deserves everything he gets. And I feel terrible for the people that went through whatever it is that he done to them. But it should never have went on for how long it did, because all the sort of stuff you hear now is people that years and years of people being fearful of their jobs and all that kind of thing. And no one should have that power over someone. No one should have that power to go that, but they're in a place of that I can get rid of, you know. And I also have this thing of being fearful of losing your job is, you know, is your job really, I always make this point of, if I was in that situation, is my job worth suffering that level of abuse and not being told that it doesn't matter? Now, I know one of the parts of this story that needs to be underlined from me is that apparently the corporation who dealt with that program didn't help people in terms of ousting Jian from what happened. Again, this is all up in arms and no one knows for sure if this is true. It seems to be that way based on what people have heard. But you know, I'm a believer in don't oust somebody until the word guilty is said in court. But again, the evidence seems to suggest that he is guilty. But again, it's just this point of everybody looks at this term right and wrong, thinking that's the be all and end all. And not only that, but they look at it in the viewpoint of what's right and wrong for them. Like their opinion is the most relevant. And I know people will look at this and go, but my opinion is the most relevant for me because I'm the one that matters in my own life. But that's a very self-centered viewpoint. And there's nothing wrong with being self-centered in terms of being confident, in terms of being, you know, aware of yourself, in terms of wanting to get the goals for your life and having the motivation to do that and not let people deter you. That's great, you know, self-centeredness to have, and that's incredibly motivational and influential to everyone around you. That should be how you would want to behave, but not to the detriment of everybody else. And that's just not thinking of that there could be other people in your situation. And it's never as simple as just saying, I'm right, let's close this box, and we're never going to open this box again because I know that I'm right. And I know watching this, you're going to know somebody who always goes, but I'm right, I know that I'm right. And there's nothing you can possibly say to make me change my mind. If you know somebody like that, they are a waste of time. They are an absolute waste of time, because you cannot. And the only way, how are we gonna get somebody like that with that mindset to get out of that twisted logic, that illogical way of thinking, is by everyone getting together with this understanding of that it's not just about them, it's not just about me, it's about everybody else included in your line of thinking. That's what morality means. You know, morality is we are the only ones that are aware of our own morality, human beings, and the only way that can happen is by human beings working together and letting and realizing that it is not just about them, it's about everybody else. And that's why it isn't just about right and wrong, it's about what's right for everybody, not just your own individual right. I imagine everybody watching this has seen somebody who has met somebody that this idea of truth as well, very similar concept. This idea of, well, my truth is my truth and their truth is theirs. So and it's like, how can your truth be true and everybody else's not be? It's true because it's true. You know, I am blonde-haired and they go, well, my truth is I actually think you're strawberry blonde, so you know, my truth is your truth. No, it's a fact. You know, okay, I'm strawberry blonde, so it's a bad example. But you know what I'm saying. It's like, well, you don't. I have a kempt beard. Well, my truth is you don't have a kempt beard. You need to trim it. Or what? I don't know. It's like, no. The truth is that, you know, the truth is I have a beard. You know, it's like. It doesn't need to have that. It doesn't. It's all based on the idea of they want to be right, and it's just not. It's just not a way to grow as a person. It just is not. Been through some incredible shit in my life, and And it's one of the things that most disappoints me about people is they have this sort of white flag philosophy of it's, oh God, how terrible. And don't think that it's all about supporting each other and getting through stuff. It's a bit like, you know, it's a bit like we have an attitude now of like, you know, if I went and said to someone, can I borrow your car because I'm moving? And they go, yeah, sure, no problem. I use their car and stuff. And then they ask me, you know, to return the favor or to give them something, and I go, no, I'm not helping, because because it's my right to, you know, it's just such a twisted logic to think that way. And another prime example of that. So just to clarify in this Jian Ghomeshi thing. So my thoughts are that if everybody didn't think that they were right for themselves and not saying anything, and actually looked at the more thing of the morally right thing to do was to talk to everybody, and as a collective human beings had the courage to talk, had the courage of their convictions to say I'm not happy with something, never would have got that far. And because also, if you don't do that, Jian might have thought he was right in his twisted, sick humor. If it turns out he's right, he may have thought he was dealing with people in the right way because nobody had the balls to say he was wrong. And that's my point. If you look in the sort of self-centered viewpoint of what's right and wrong for just yourself, there's someone else who's going to think exactly the same thing, that they're right on something that they're terribly wrong about. And it's because you're not looking at the perspective of us as a group, not as an individual. You can't be right about everything, and very often or not, you need to be under the awareness of that you're going to be wrong way more than you are right, and that's how you learn. Because again, it's a bit like this idea of, you know, as I was saying, of being honest, having this honest attitude of, oh, I'm going to be honest by saying that you've got terrible hair and whatever it is. No, you're just a cunt. You're just a cunt for saying, I'm going to say whatever I want and say, well, I'm just being honest. There's so many people who do that as well. Just being honest, dude, that I think you're a prick and I don't like it. Well, fuck you. But at the same time, we should, with the avenue of free speech, people don't like this idea and this argument of, to be the reverse of that, is that that free speech includes people's right to be offensive. So we need to stick to that and not just think that everything's going to be great all of the time, because and really the sort of the more, you know, overlapping point in all of this is that we always seem to go for the avenue of let's survive rather than thrive. Something I always say to myself, you always go for the avenue of it's easier to survive and it's harder to thrive, but it should be that way. You should have to work for everything you get. It's, you know, and if life's difficult, why not us all support each other to thrive together? You know, if you don't share and don't support somebody, you're a cunt. You're a self-centered cunt, and that's what you are. Like you're not anything else. You're not someone who's just protecting themselves for the benefit of them and doing the right thing. No, you're a cunt, and you're not looking at the bigger picture. That's all I ever. I see that more often than anything, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm guilty of sometimes losing that, but I always come back to telling myself the best to go back to that ideology, and it's just the moral compass of I'm not going to do something that's detrimental to somebody else. But everyone just goes. But I always hear far more often this idea of do what's best for you, as in do what you think is right for you. But very often, if you have that attitude, you're going to end up. It's not supporting the race. It's not supporting your fellow man and fellow woman and fellow whatever. You know, you're just not. It's just what. So we're just going to spend our entire life not helping people, being self-centered, inclusive, not exclusive, exclusive, not inclusive, rather. And there's another example of this that I think this sort of twisted logic of, well, it's right for me. And it was on Joe Rogan's podcast. I listened to an old one with Bill Burr. And I listened to it and I was really sort of annoyed at Brian Redbans' response to Bill Burr It was a while ago. It was like episode 80 something, because I only got into Joe Rogan's podcast about sort of 200 episodes in. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to listen to the old ones, because obviously I was too far. I'd been too far in that I had to go back and look at all the old ones, and I've been watching a lot of the Bill Burr ones because he's been on the podcast quite a lot of times. So I look back at some of the old ones, and I think it was around sort of episode 80 something, and they talk about this idea of making money off podcasting and how sort of difficult it was at the time. I think this was around like 2011, 2012, so it was just like sort of before podcasting became, it still needs to get there in a lot of ways, but it became a sort of viable way of making, of being able to cover costs for the time that you put into it. And Stitcher came out at the time. Now, I'm just going to say, for potential legal reasons or whatever, that not that, you know, that might be a problem, but just to say that it's more the validity of my argument, is that Stitcher may have changed their views now. I don't know, I haven't researched that point, but they have made it that they basically used to take people's RSS feeds, like Joe's and Bill Burr's and Mark Maron's and other well-established podcasters, put it on the Stitcher app and then charge advertising within those podcasts, and they made 100% of the money, and they wouldn't tell people. And apparently this happened to Bill Burr and to Mark Maron, and they mentioned this on the podcast. So Bill Burr says, well, naturally, I just took down my podcast from their website, told them to take it off, and I was pissed at them because, you know, I'm providing a content and they're just taking my content and making money off it, and here I am not making any money at all. And Brian Redbans, and I like him in the majority of the podcast, but he was completely wrong in this point from a moral standpoint, which is why this is irrelevant to what we're talking about, is that he just basically turned around and said, well, if you provide free content on the internet, that gives people the right to do whatever they want with it. How unbelievably wrong. You know, he basically was trying to tell people what an RSS feed is. Now, for those that don't know, I'll tell you really blatantly fast, that it's basically a feed, like a line of code that you can put into to RSS feed finders, and like it's like a list. It lists your podcast on sites, like a coded version of your podcast, so lists end up on different things. And you know, I know that's happened on my podcast, and that's basically how iTunes gets you submit your feed, and then the list gets automatically added, so your podcasts end up on there when you upload them. So you can put that in loads of different avenues, and he was basically saying, well, if you have an RSS feed, you know, everybody does that, so you should be upset with everybody, and therefore you shouldn't do podcasting at all. Like, it's acceptable for companies to do that. And here's why it's a problem for those that don't know podcasting or anything to do with free content on the internet. If you take someone's content and re-upload it and then charge people to see it, so let's say you take a UFC pay-per-view and you stream it on your site and say it'll cost you $4 to watch it per person, you are doing something illegal, and everybody should have the attitude of that is wrong. Yet Brian Redbans was doing the argument that all these people have that don't think and are self-centered in their thinking, of saying that it's okay to do that because you're getting more exposure. No, they're making money off something you do for free. So if the remit is that you release it for free, anyone can listen to it for free, but making money is illegal. It's wrong. It's morally wrong on every standard, and you should be upset. I'm upset for Bill. I don't even know Bill, and when I listened to that, I was pissed off, and I wanted to do something about it because I'm on the moral right thing here. You know, but Brian Redbans had the attitude of, well, they didn't do that to my podcast, so I'm not bothered. And that's exactly my point. Is if we have this attitude of that self-centered right and wrong is between just us and not everybody else, then you're not going to be there for the fellow man, and you're not going to support anybody that you know, and you're self-centered, and you're not thinking of the bigger picture. Because I was mad about that. And my now thing is if my podcast ends up on Stitcher, you know, okay, yeah, I'm the small person on the totem pole trying to make my podcast relevant, But if that ever, you know, even if Stitcher didn't offer me any money, and I just put it on anyway, I am severely, you know, I would need to do some heavy research to see if Stitcher, and I probably won't use them now. But then everyone goes, but you're decreasing your exposure. No, I'm doing what's morally right. Morally right for the benefit of everybody, for fellow podcasters, because that happening to Bill Burr was terrible. Because they never even came to him and say, here's a percentage of the money. No, we're going to take every bit of your content. It's exactly the same as someone ripping a DVD and putting it on YouTube and taking advertising revenue or charging people to see it. And, you know, it's not the same as like lending your friend a DVD because you've already purchased it to the provider of the thing. That's acceptable. It's, you know, you can even make the argument of, you know, we can even go into the tiny argument of it may be right to take snippets of stuff, and that's exposure. That's fine. But full content of something that you provide yourself. So say someone takes my podcast and starts charging people to listen to it, yet on my podcast, on my website, and everybody and on all the other places it's at, I don't charge for it. I have a problem with that, and everybody should have a problem with that, because it's not morally acceptable. You know, because if that happened, always have the approach of, when you think of right and wrong, how would you feel if that happened to you? That's more beneficial than saying, oh, it's just right for me. No, it's like, how would you feel in that scenario? And I don't think enough people spend enough time doing that. I think the best way of describing the thing of it's not just about right and wrong is to do this quote by Parker Johnson, who got asked about Jian Ghomeshi's situation, and he says it's not just protesting what's wrong and making suggestions about how to make it right. It's also standing in the trenches, standing shoulder to shoulder, doing what needs to be done to make the changes happen. I've seen it happen in the disability community, in the environment communities, and in youth and queer communities. And he's so right. That's how we should behave on things. We should stand toe to toe when somebody does something that's wrong and say to them, look, that's not right in what you're doing. You know, that, and in this example, if it turns out that Jian's thing is true, then they shouldn't have let that linger for years on end. Yeah, okay, you can be scared or whatever it may be, but it's almost like if you don't say something that happens to you and say to someone how bad it is and admit it, it's like it's sort of the idea of that you're never going to be scared or anything happens ever again. And that's what I mean by self-preservation and being that self-centered and that scared of risk, is that if you take a person out of your life that is a risk, then you're never going to need to risk take again. It's this selective risk, or like having this perceived as selective risk, but then when it's not at all, it's just you're not taking any risks at all. I think you know, Parker Johnson there just summed it up brilliantly, that we all should be in this together and try and come up with a collective right, not a single right for an individual. And the truth is the truth. You can't change it. You know, so just like all these people in this terrible situation, you know, there's two examples there of someone losing money and it's morally wrong, and a person going, but it didn't happen to me. Are we going to have the same attitude with what happened to the people with Jian, that we shouldn't be upset because, oh, how many people can you name that you've met? Because I know a lot of people that go, I'm so glad that didn't happen to me. I mean, what an awful attitude. Well, good for you, but one time that may happen to you, and how are you going to feel? And then what? So you're just going to have this attitude from now on of that, oh, well, I'm just going to hope it doesn't happen to me. Because what if something does? What if you get something awful happening to you like that, and you suddenly find that everyone has that attitude, and you're wishing people were different? So my point is, how about we make a difference now and do something about it, and realize that it's not just about right and wrong, it's about supporting each other, supporting our fellow man, woman, child, you know, to make things better, regardless of what illness, difficulties we have, because we all have them, and it's about facing them head on. It's not about surviving and being self-preservation, it's about thriving together and supporting each other. And as I say, let's start, as I think Parker Johnson summed it up brilliantly, let's all stand in the trenches shoulder to shoulder, doing what we can to make that change. So whenever you're thinking about right and wrong, maybe if you think that you're thinking about it in a sort of bubble of your own system, maybe think about it twice before you make a decision on it. Been really interesting. Thanks guys. Please subscribe if you like my vlog, and I'll be around soon, and follow and check us out on Twitch every day and all that kind of thing. But thank you for checking out my vlog. I really appreciate it, and I hope I've gave you stuff to think about. And if you've got anything you'd like to say, please leave a comment. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thanks. Take care.